stop at the border most of the products that we've been receiving from Africa, which have been built on years and years of colonialism, and that colonialism was actually taken over by certain multilaterals and multinationals that continue those patterns. We have to shift all of that. We need to think through it, and it is complex. You're absolutely right.
One comment on that. I believe that we should think disruptively. Sorry about this. And we should invest once more on technology. I was here the other day. I heard someone, a company called Solmeia, I think, and they're working about producing nutrients from seaweed and even from CO2 emissions. So let's invest on that. Disruptive way of solving that kind of problems. But at the end of the day, you see that technology and it can help us in many ways. That I didn't believe it at first. I'm telling you, I was very skeptic about it. But now with this consortium that we're dealing with, we're pretty sure that we can help people in a better way.
So I want you guys to put your crystal ball. I want you to pull out your crystal ball here, and kind of give us your outlook for the next 6 to 12, maybe even 24 months. What is the impact of the war in Ukraine on the African continent? Is there going to be a major food crisis? Where does this end? What does this look like? What are governments going to do? What do you think they're going to do, not do? What is the response going to be? Talk about where you think this is going in the next 24 months. What's your thought?
You want me to go first? You go first.
You want to start?
No, please.
You go.
Please.
Go ahead.
No one wants to deal with the question.
It's a very complex one, very well, because nobody knows how many months this thing's going to last. Because we are still on the first response.
Let me put on top of it a major recession. Global recession that is being predicted.
It's coming. Yeah, no, it's coming. We're going to have a lot of work, to tell you the truth. But
that's not an answer. That's not an answer.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of work, I'm telling you that. Let's stick on Ukraine. We are still on assessment of the situation. We're trying to figure out how to ease the pain of these people. First of all, it's the people. We don't forget that everything that's happening is affecting the population. Yeah? This is the most important thing. We also talk about energy, we talk dependencies, but it's the population that is most affected. Yeah. We need to find a way to get the help through. This is the most important for us. We need to find a way to get the help through. Because help is not getting through at the moment. We need to find a way to help those that they have also migrated from Ukraine. Don't forget also these Ukrainians that there are also in other parts of Europe.
Is the EU going to get tired of supporting Ukrainians that have 10 million now? At some point, when does the patience for that aid and that assistance wear off?
First of all, Europe, as Mr. Schina says, they must work a little bit faster. This is the one thing that I have understood. And they are still trying to identify the specific mechanism that is going to absorb the money that they have raised. So there is money there sitting and there is no mechanism to absorb it yet. So it's going to be discussed also, very well on the 30th of May, of this proposal of the new funding mechanism. When we get there, we're going to move fast. I'm pretty sure about this because we have we as Europeans have also shown our strength during the pandemic, and it's going to be the same with Ukraine.
Okay.
But it's another 6 or 7 months that the people of Ukraine are going to be living in the dark with no water. You know, this is what I'm saying. I don't know how it's going to be in 12 months. This is my answer to your question. We're still working on it.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm not happy with that answer, but it's okay.
So let me bring
I'm
in
just teasing.
an analogy linked to the new publication that will be coming out actually in September, which is our Earth for All book publication, which is building on the limits to growth, but it's looking at 2 scenarios, and I want to apply those 2 scenarios to your question. One is the too little too late scenario, and the other one is the giant leap scenario. So the too little too late scenario applied to this situation is that, first of all, we don't deal with the situation at hand with regard to Russia. We continue to have an invasion that is so incredibly disruptive and does continue to wreak havoc on our food and our energy system, wreaks havoc on the humanitarian system, where we continue to have migration coming over from Ukraine. And we don't work with the Ukrainians to rethink what Ukraine looks like in that vision of the future, because I had the pleasure last night of being with an incredible population of Ukrainians, and many of them young Ukrainians. And they truly believe that the future of Ukraine is a bright one, that actually we can rebuild the Ukraine, that it will be the grandest Marshall Plan ever. And in discussions also with the IMF and other leaders in Ukraine, the idea is this can be a test bed of what humanity can do better.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the giant leap scenario, if we're able to forego those stress points that you so rightly bring up. So what are those stress points? We will in the next 3 months have rationing across Europe. That's clear. In discussions with the cabinet of von der Leyen, we have been planning for rationing. That's on the energy side. How do we deal with rationing in Europe at a time when we have a recession, if not an absolute depression? And the way to do that is to make sure that we put communication on overdrive, that we look at the way in which we can bring in fiscal incentives so that the lives and livelihoods of people who have already been affected by COVID are not further affected. The other key scenario, if we move into the leapfrog scenario, is that if we do put communication on overdrive, we also tap into the consciousness of people who have made it through COVID. Because what is it that people realized through COVID? And most of us were completely privileged during that time. But the first thing that they realized is we are as vulnerable as the most vulnerable link. So if we don't take care of that problem on our doorstep, it will multiply. And we may also have another pandemic on top of it. Number 2, we need to get back to what's most essential. Did any of us really worry about how many cars we had or how many suits we had hanging in our closet? Really? I hope not. I know I didn't, because I was on so many Zoom calls, it didn't matter what I wore under the top. The fact of the matter is, what really worried me? Having access to a vaccine, making sure that I could get medical treatment, and making sure that my family and my friends were not dying. That's what worried me. That is what we have to tap into. This is no longer the time of being addicted to consumption or being addicted to a certain type of security that we thought we had before. Oh dear. It's about coming back to what's most essential.
We're
We're in Greece. Opa.
Good breaks there.
I will.
Nice exclamation point on that.
Yes.
I will go say right off the bat that I don't do predictions. I don't do crystal balls. But I will say things that I think could happen, scenarios that I could see happening across some multiple issues. Let's say first politics, energy, food, migration, and investment. We have seen in the last 2 years 5 coups in the whole of Africa, where we only had seen 1 in the previous 3 years. Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Sudan, and a war in Ethiopia. Global insecurity creates African instability, and an ongoing crisis in Ukraine cannot help political stability in Africa. So we have to be mindful that we will see more coups and more political violence in African countries going forward.
How do we stop that? As a global community.
Intervention sometimes creates political instability.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's a problem. I mean, how do we, I mean, what, the old model hasn't worked. What is a model, what is something that we need to try, at least?
If I had the answer to that, I'd give it to you right now. But
Okay.
I think people have been trying to solve the African coup problem for decades, and they continue to incur with frequency. Number two, energy. And in this case, there are winners and losers, and I don't think the winners can win soon enough in the space of 2 years to really benefit from this, and that's the benefit of higher energy prices. With the $100 oil, you can start reinvesting in offshore exploration where you wouldn't before. All of the international oil companies were exiting Africa. With the $100 oil, they're saying maybe we go back in. 2 years is way too short of a window to have an impact in reversing production declines in African countries and make a real dent in the production loss during the Russian.
There have been some new discoveries, though.
There have been new discoveries, but it takes a few years to really bring them into production.
Okay. In new countries.
Yes.
Right.
Africa is really only responsible for about 8% of the world's oil production. So really making a dent in the production loss in Russia is going to take a large amount of time, while you have certain countries, all the top 5 oil producers in Africa are declining in oil production still. So the need for investment is massive.
But not in oil, huh? You're not saying we need to invest in oil, are you?
I think that's the reality. I was just in another panel a few minutes ago at S&P, and what we were talking about was, as the war in Ukraine has pushed us into more sustainable energy, we are going to backtrack. The feeling was that we are going to backtrack a little bit, and have to compromise and start invest. There's going to be investment now in oil and gas and coal in the short term.
Yeah. But that's because of the price,
Of
and
the
that's
pricing.
because of the profit motive.
Right.
If we offset that
Right.
by reducing demand and looking at demand management scenarios and energy efficiency, we probably could do without that extra investment. I'm not saying we're cutting out
that's
gas.
exactly what I was getting at. There's a short-term profit motive here that will be very, very enticing for host governments that have already been
Right.
dependent on
Exactly.
oil prices. We saw this happening in 2015 when the oil price crashed. A lot of the host governments in Africa didn't learn from that lesson. They didn't reform, they didn't diversify their economies. They've been waiting for this cycle to come around. And so they are potential winners in this situation, but may not be able to escape the profit motive.
Yeah.
Which means it's not going to be done equitably. There's not the communities aren't going to benefit from these.
Nor are they going to use this to diversify their economies.
No, and then
Right.
they'll have more stranded assets, which is
No, on the flip side of that is, what do you do if you're an oil importing country? And I think the crisis is going to be, there's going to be a bigger energy crisis in some countries than a food crisis.
Yeah.
We're already seeing it in Kenya. There are fuel shortages in Kenya that are linked to a shortage of dollars. So it's both a forex problem and an energy problem. If you've got continuous $100 oil and you've got a lack of dollars, you're going to see long lines at the petrol station.
Yeah.
So I don't think 2 years is long enough to be able to solve these problems, and unfortunately that might be the window of opportunity needed to really solve this in a continent that has, we are reminded, only 40% of the population that has access to energy.
Your investment?
Beg your pardon?
Wasn't that the fourth point, is the investment, right?
Investment, FDI, and this is something that we're already seeing. Investments in private equities is on the decline. I've seen private equities searching around, raising new funds that are stalling, especially funds in infrastructure. Foreign direct investment, unless there is a real voluntary effort for African governments to become more attractive, the foreign direct investment is going to stall. Africa, for as long as we've been keeping track of corporate income tax, has the highest tax rates in the world out of any region, continually for the last 25 years. It is harder to invest in an African country on average than it is to invest anywhere else in the world. It takes longer to open a business, the taxes are higher, the quality of infrastructure is the poorest, the Forex problems are the most acute, and the access to all of the resources that you might need to start a thriving business are not what you're going to find around the world. You cannot expect to attract foreign direct investment unless you create a playing field that is attractive for foreign investors. I would use this opportunity to really reform the way of doing business in most African countries in order to stay ahead of the pace.
Let me ask another question about crypto and blockchain and NFTs and new technologies that are now the buzzword all over Davos and globally. Are those financial instruments, some would say they're assets, some would say they're money. That's not, I don't want to get to that debate. But are those the sort of things that we need to be thinking about at a global policy level as ways that can help bring some stability, can help change help sort of make a difference in some of these conflict areas and some of these areas that are facing extreme poverty, and in your case, deliver aid to where it needs to get when people need it. I mean, are we at the policy level having these kind of discussions and acknowledging that some of these new technologies, some of these new ways of thinking about money and transactions could be an answer to some of these challenges? Anybody?
Okay,
Please.
I can go. Again, totally from an African standpoint, cryptocurrency, crypto trading, is an absolute solution for currency instability in Africa. If you've got a naira that is depreciating versus the dollar, you can offset that by investing in cryptocurrency, which is what we've been seeing in countries like Nigeria. We've been seeing it accelerating on the African continent. The only problem is that there's an extreme aversion amongst governments towards cryptocurrency. There's more aversion towards cryptocurrency in Africa than anywhere else in the world. 40% of the countries that ban trading of cryptocurrency are African countries, among them Nigeria. And so there's a sort of you illegalize what you don't understand phenomenon in Africa, which should be the reverse. We should be embracing these technologies, and the people who are embracing these technologies are young people who don't necessarily have access to bank accounts, who really want to try something new and could be at the forefront of financial technology, but are being essentially punished by their host governments that feel it's a threat to their stability.
And a way to trade with other places around the world in a way that's secure, safe, and gives both parties confidence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just dispersing remittances is, again, a continent that's the greatest source of remittances in the world, would benefit from being able to trade cryptocurrency in order to send money from Davos to Addis Ababa.
Right.
I could state our point of view regarding the blockchain and crypto, and I must be excused if I'm not using the right words because I'm not an IT guy. I'm a medical doctor, so I don't know all this information. But I have seen that it can do miracles. This technology thing. It's the open data. It gives access to people that they are not IT literate, and I mean, it can vary from using this technology for giving the right humanitarian help to those in need, this targeted humanitarian help to those in need, when with a press of the button and an application they can say, okay, I need water now. I'm pressing the application and we in a platform can see that, okay, water is needed in this area, so we can gather our resources and deliver directly to them. And it can, for example, reunite families, migration families that are from one country to the other, that have migrated. And with the press of a button, they say, okay, I'm alive and I'm here. Or during an earthquake, I'm safe. Or during a fire, I'm on the other side of the woods. I'm giving just examples now. I don't know if everything and any of this is feasible. I'm pretty sure that most of it is feasible. But it has given us access to something else that for sure I'm pretty convinced that is for the better use of for what we do, this humanitarian aid that we are delivering.
I guess my only reflection on crypto and the continued financialization of our economy is just a slight worry, and I fully agree with the benefits. It is clear that crypto has a role to play. My worry is that the economy has become totally transactional and no longer truly reflects people's lives and livelihoods. I mean, in the past, if you fired 1,000 people, your shares would not go up, or 10,000 people. Now it does. That's seen as a good thing. So my only worry is we have a dysfunctional financial system and a dysfunctional economy that no longer services people, planet, and prosperity. Now, crypto and any of our new financial instruments that are in the ether can play an incredible role as long as the sole purpose is not just short-term profits or even short-term decision-making. If it is really trying to play a role for the long term to create stability within the market and to ensure that people's lives and livelihoods are better. And that is my only worry. And if we start to link up, for example, Sharon Burrows, who I'm going to go and see just now, who's just unbelievable as the head of the International Trade Union Confederation, and she clearly says there are no jobs on a dead planet. Well, there's no crypto on a dead planet. There's no any of this on a dead planet. So we got to make sure that the role of anything that we now bring forward truly has a purpose to make our lives better, rather than just a profit motive. That doesn't mean that you don't make a profit, because clearly businesses, unfortunately, have been fully dependent on profits. But it just means that we have to have purpose and profit at the same time.
So this is
Being so the Davos to do that, be solving the problem.
Yes.
But everybody's talking about without like specific measures to take.
Please introduce yourself and
I'm the Vice President of the European Parliament. I'm working on blockchain and crypto a lot, and I'm like everybody's talking about ESG, but like nobody's actually presenting solutions. And like this was 5 years ago, and 5 years later we're still in the same point. At the same point, and the perfect storm is ahead of us. Like really, really heavy storm is like we're not really watching what's coming next. So I think it's very nice, but we have to be specific. We have to tell them what they have to do.
So come to our hearing in the
we cannot say the companies who decide. We cannot say we expect them to do it. We have to convince them. We have to ask them specific things that they should achieve, specific targets, or we will be back here several years from now.
So we had an interesting conversation last night at dinner, at the dinner that we were at. You were at my table.
Ah, yes, I was. I was at your table, that's great. So we solved that problem yesterday.
So what is you can give us a political answer, I understand. What is the European Union's position on things like currencies, NFTs, cryptos? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No,
but
don't. It's fine. I don't think.
And where is it going? Where is that policy going to lead?
Well, actually, we are concluding the crypto assets file, but it doesn't include NFTs or decentralized finance. So we just talk about stable coins. What is a stable coin? So we don't have such market manipulation as we did in US, with something that appeared to be a stable coin but wasn't. It was not collateralized, and so we are trying to ensure we have like common definitions, a European sandbox, to create legal certainty, to allow applications to happen. So we are like actually supporting innovation on this technology. It's not good or bad. Nobody will like dislike it, as long as they see the value, the business model that and the value behind that in specific cases. But again, 5 years ago, I was here super excited. It's a great technology. It promises everything. All solutions, let's find the problems, and now we have so many problems, but we need to see delivering some solutions. So what I'm saying is that instead of like talking about it, I think we are developing like a methodology to measure the impact, the social, environmental of its technology and its application, its service. It's very complex, but at least we are trying to say you have to be specific on your targets. You have to prove like specific metrics. You cannot say I allow my employees to volunteer for 2 days per year and this is my ESG or CSR. So we need to aim higher for at least the Davos people, since we're here.
But there's a general philosophy that this is activity that is legal. It should be traded. We're not going to say whether it has massively positive or massively negative outcomes, but in principle, cryptocurrency should be traded.
Yeah, nobody's saying something different.
No.
We're just saying that they have to follow the rules under the ones that we constructed. Everybody seems happy with that. The final issue to solve the next month is the unhosted wallets and the threshold that they want to remove completely, that I think would destroy this financial inclusion for the unbanked, because we do have unbanked people also in Europe, and blockchain was a solution and they want to take that away. Hopefully
This is exactly what I was getting at. The motive of financial inclusion being placed at the top. We have, again...
Would Africa follow? Would they follow if the European Union comes down this way?
Absolutely. This is exactly what I'm getting at. Algeria, Libya, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, these are all countries that still ban the trading of cryptocurrencies in places where there is a lower level of financial inclusion than other parts. These are people who are unbanked, don't have access to roads, they don't have access to electricity. They are completely excluded from the financial system and blocked.
Because of corruption, right? Or
Excuse
what?
me?
Because of corruption, because they want to control it.
Why are they unbanked?
No, why they don't want to
They
accept.
don't understand it.
It don't understand it. It's a threat to stability. In Nigeria, they discovered that cryptocurrency had been used in order to raise funds for protests. Last year, the same thing had been discovered in Ghana shortly after, that youths were mobilizing to raise capital in order to fund political movements. So again, you ban what you don't understand at the expense of communities that could benefit.
But once we are concluded, then you could actually become an ambassador and explain that this could be a blueprint, like the European framework, also for Africa, and we can do that because we're like trying to invest like.
Let me
tech diplomacy with Africa. And
let me pivot real quick, and I want to bring you into I want to bring you into this conversation.
Do you want to actually come and sit?
No. I want to bring you. No. This is great.
I was just passing by.
No. This is great, and I'm glad, because look, I want to bring it back to countries like Greece, right, and some of the smaller countries in Europe that are struggling financially. I mean, Greece just went through a massive financial crisis a few years ago, and is recovering. These new regulations, how do they impact smaller European countries who are need to be creative, particularly if we find getting to a recession, new and creative ways to survive and thrive? I mean, I don't know anywhere. Does that make sense?
No, we improve that. Instead of having 27 different ones, you have a European sandbox to exit in a safe environment, so legal certainty for the DLT, so tokenization of traditional secure assets. And then we have the crypto assets, so defining stable coins and defining what can be accepted as e-money. So we are dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
We're giving you a European environment, which is a market of 500 million people. This is like huge. So come with solutions and applications, we make it possible. the opposite would be bad, like to allow 27 different ones. So the smaller ones, they can say, you can come to my country. So Greece could, for example, have, let's say, a legal framework, blockchain friendly, and then invite everybody from Greece to address like such a European market with blockchain solutions, and then you can of course build the bridges with Middle East and Africa, North Africa especially, now that we are shutting down with Russia. This would be a possibility, and then we could see some light, at the end of the tunnel, because we're not ready for this perfect storm. We're not ready to cut the oil with
I mean,
Russia.
that's a massive opportunity for a country like Greece to take advantage of this shutdown with Russia. I mean, that's a great point. Thank you. I mean, that.
I wanted to ask you your point, which I also picked up on, which is ESG and
Yep.
responsible care, because I fully agree with you that we need to up the bar on what that actually means in practice. What we've seen, interestingly, is that through COVID, ESG funds grew 3 times the amount that they were before. And a lot of that comes from the fact that they were de-risked. They were de-risked because actually most of these funds went through the full value chain and understood the impact and the risks of not doing environmentally, social, or governance-related risk assessment. And I think that's a really important move. Now, I agree, though, ESG is often greenwashed or
Totally.
social washed.
Yeah.
Totally
Or
greenwashed.
Absolutely.
Total-
And we tried to change that, and now I'm going to really put
Yeah.
you on the spot because I sit on the taxonomy workforce and the EU platform on sustainable finance, and we've just put forward the taxonomy criteria, which are in the European Parliament right now, trying to move away from greenwashing and seeing very clearly how politicized the real issues of deciding what is green and what isn't green. Not going to get into the absolute detail of who sits where, but the fact of the matter is that even when we try to become more effective in terms of our metrics, which are based on science decision making, it's very difficult because of incumbents, because of where our dependencies are, which comes back to oil and gas in many ways, but also nuclear, and the way in which member states across Europe are dependent on some of these energies.
Yeah, but if I may, the technology is not there yet, so unfortunately we need to have a transition phase. So this is one of the problems. And the second is we cannot just focus on where the energy comes from. So to ensure that it's green, we have to follow the whole circle of the energy supply chain, because we call it green. It comes from fossil fuel. If it's electric, it's fine, which is not the case. So we have to be able to understand the whole life cycle of any system, service, technology. So we are not mature enough to achieve better targets. But I don't talk about just the ones that we're looking at, like green energy. By design, everything could have a different mentality to be able to have like social metrics, to have like environmental friendly metrics. It's not just these. It's
Agreed.
like
Fully agree.
circularities, like everything.
Regenerative
Circular
and
economy.
circular.
And that's a realistic. That's a
Yeah,
realistic look at.
absolutely.
That's right. That's a realistic.
Yes, I'm like more realistic than like saying I'm doing the pure
Yeah.
maritime file now. We have like great targets, but they're not realistic. They don't have time to. We don't have the infrastructure at the ports already. Even if we
Yeah.
want to achieve that, so it takes time and it takes funding. And you said infrastructure funding, and the governments need to be there and so that they're willing to collaborate. And IMO, because shipping is global, so IMO has to also be ambitious.
So
it's
the
not
only
just
problem
Europe,
with that
right?
is I fully agree with you, except that already 20 years ago, we developed the legislation with Heidi Hautala, who's also one of the vice
Yeah,
presidents.
Heidi's very nice. Yeah.
Exactly. So Heidi
Very
and I
ambitious.
developed the legislation on sulfur and fuels. We already spoke to the ports. They've known this forever. We have not, as Europeans, actually invested in the infrastructure to allow us to shift. And I fully agree with you. The transition could have been made. We do need amber. But what we should have done is already 10 years ago, and then with Crimea, which was a huge wake-up call, and Georgia, really bit the bullet and invested in the infrastructure that was necessary. And now we're caught with our pants down, and we're all saying this is the moment to finally invest, when we knew already with the first climate and energy package 10 years ago, at least in Europe, that we should have already started that
We need to
investment.
develop storage technologies.
Agreed.
Okay, I was at another panel right before this one, moderating it, and I won't say who said it, but it is one of the largest offices, family offices in Europe, and their thinking was that the energy sector is really one of the most lucrative and attractive things to invest in the world. I mean, they are super excited about the possibilities there. But I want to move on.
In the meantime, the climate crisis is here, the
Yes.
humanitarian crisis is here, and we're still talking about
Yes. Yes,
the financial aspect of the green transition. Yes,
right.
Yeah, but things will have to develop together.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, there's a political
So
reality.
the
there's a-
ESG must have also a very strengthened social aspect.
Well,
This is
there's a
my
political
opinion,
reality.
yeah.
There's a political reality for politicians, right? You have to. This has to be a slow process. This has to be a transitional process.
There's a practical reality, which is that the technologies required for a zero carbon future by 2040, only 40% exist at the pilot stage. So we can't expect to have a zero carbon future if the technologies required to do it at scale don't exist today.
But we can already start.
We can start,
Yeah.
but
But we
this
are
is
not
why
starting
the word
fast enough.
we have to
Yeah.
emphasize the word transition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. So
This is what caused the small crisis before the war, because the energy prices like skyrocketed before Ukraine. This is not just Ukraine.
I'm going to take a temperature in the room. How are we on time? 20 more minutes. Are you guys tired of this conversation? You want to continue? Continue. Okay. Well, let's get you guys involved then. Can we shut that door real quick because it's really loud?
Okay, so we have to heat versus noise.
All right. So, questions, and let's make them germane to this sort of conversation. Anybody?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Sorry, because there were so many topics going on, one after another, and Ukraine to crypto to renewables, and so I have something in all three. But let's start with crypto first. There's a basic problem with some.
The camera. That's the camera.
The basic problem, actually, what is happening with crypto in most of the countries where kind of, you said the financial inclusion is not there. But the problem what is coming for the policy makers is when you do a transaction in crypto, let's see, blockchain is one part of it, currency is one part of it. The volume transaction, the way it happens, the inclusion of government goes away. Because I do a transaction today in crypto, I can do a transaction without involving any part of government into it. So my problem as a policy maker begins when I want to create an asset for my people, asset for everyone included in it. They don't get included in it. The money gets generated from a country and it goes to crypto market without even involving anyone. So the governments are facing this problem if they allow crypto to just, the lady from European Parliament and the moderator said, this is the basic problem with the crypto and it will remain for some time. Because as a policy maker, I am not sure still that how do I monetize it to create my asset. Because end of the day, you and I, let's forget about the illegal part of the transaction. But whatever legal part of the transaction is done, a government gets a share to create infrastructure for the people. So most of the countries are facing this problem and it will take some time. We are doing something in crypto. So we are creating a platform and this is the basic problem we are facing when we are discussing with the policymakers. They're asking how do we framework that we know that it is happening legally.
Can you introduce yourself and?
Sorry. I'm Mahesh. I run a green energy company. We are called Greenco. In fact, we are one of the largest green energy company of the world. And we are in Asia. And we creating some green molecules where we, again, trying to link it, going away with the normal way of transaction and linking with the crypto or AI-based currency. That's how these two things are linked. And since morning, we have gone and we have discussed many things. And the problem with the green energy, green molecules, as we are saying, I'll be very honest with you, we have 11 gigawatts of energy running systems now. We are easily traceable. You can trace us from beginning to last, whether it is green energy or not. And green energy, coming date to now, see today, the world will change. And I'll just, sorry, I'm taking a little bit of time. Today what is happening,
Yes, come here. Here. Take this down.
It's all right. He's all right.
you got promoted.
Please, sir.
So for the green energy, what we are doing now, we are getting out of these PPA modes of the government. We are no power purchase agreement with various governments what they do. So the first time what we're doing now, we're creating green energy. We're creating a cycle where we will have our own hydrogen, green hydrogen. We'll have our own green ammonia, so that we link all together. See, green energy will...
Hydrogen from what?
So what's the question?
The question is, that traceability part of green energy. That whether today we are facing a problem because you don't know how to define green. You don't know how to trace whether the end product is actually green or not. So this will not complete until unless the cycle gets finished at the level of green consumption itself. You produce green energy, you create green molecules, and you supply those green molecules across the chain. And you create a zone, because until unless you don't create a zone, green energy will never be traceable. There is no way green and fossils can be traced or traced back to it. It has to be finished in a way where the end products comes from exactly from that cycle and it is traced there and then.
Okay.
So
Let's let these guys comment on that.
yeah.
Thank you. Any thoughts?
Never heard about green energy
Who's got a response
molecules
right
until now. So
Okay.
I can respond on the first part. I mean, you can use exchanges of crypto assets and have a layer of automate the tax collection, and that is solved. There is a solution there already, like 4 or 5 huge ones in US and Europe. So this is solved. This is not a problem because you enter through fiat, with fiat money. So the moment you enter or exit, that you can be traced. I don't know how much of our transactions anybody wants to follow because we have cash and nobody knows what we do with it in any case. So that doesn't make much difference. Biggest corruption happens with cash actually, not with crypto. If you measure the money that they went there.
Is Europe gonna be a model for Asia and the US, you think?
We hope to. So I'm telling you the good things, so you have to promote that. We did it with GDPR, hopefully we can do it again. And for green energy, we just said that we are trying to work on that in order to identify also the source if it remains green and is not just like, just part of it. So this is something we are working on. So if you have any ideas, you have to let us know. There is no solution yet because we are trying to monitor the whole supply chain. It's not easy, but it's possible and technically possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm agreeing, that it is possible. It is possible to trace the entire chain of green molecules.
Good. Anybody else? Going.
Okay, I can give some good news.
Okay.
So we have an environmental investment fund for Greece, and a lot of these things that you talked about before have been around for a long time. IMO legislation, standards, ESG standards, for a long time, but there wasn't enforcement. There was no political support. Now in Greece, you have an opportunity to have a coalition between government, corporates, and innovators. And you also have a lot of use cases in Greece around those environmental innovations. So you can take a lot of what's been doing elsewhere, like you just said, and you can apply it. And if you have those two things present at the same time, then you can unleash a big wave of productivity. And we see that.
Do you have some examples?
Yeah, I do. We are building a group of electric ferries with the Silicon Valley company. We're co-investing with like Bill Gates Fund and some of the great early stage VCs in Silicon Valley. But these guys are trying to decarbonize shipping, like you just said. But that tech curve it's a long tech curve, and they want to try to do like flying dolphins for container ships. But then on the way up, they could also do flying dolphins for passengers. So, you know, we approached them a long time ago and said, what are you guys going to do with with an electric ferry in the Bay of San Francisco? You know, we have 200 islands. It's an amazing use case. We have support, you know, money from EU to subsidize, incentivize those programs. The government's very supportive. We have an installed base of customers, and we have an installed base of users, right? It's been perfect. So
Okay.
yeah, we're launching one. Gonna take you from Piraeus to Spetses soon.
I'd gladly.
Powered by green energy, I presume.
So depending, right? And as you said, the infrastructure is being put there by people like they, and authorized by people like the government, right? They're saying, okay, what should the plug should be look like in the port when that thing comes and plugs in? And if your corporates are still in the dark ages, then you know you won't have a product because you have the innovation, but you don't have the corporate or the government engagement.
Thank you.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any final closing words? We have to wrap it up, unfortunately. I do thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for our online audience that's here at Davos Greek House 2022. You guys have any final closing words or thoughts? Are you? I've got one.
Okay.
I've got one. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future?
I'm always optimistic. You can ask all my colleagues, I'm always optimistic.
Okay.
I believe in ourselves. This is the most important. I believe that we can do a lot of things. We see that there is a will now, and we try to make the best use of it.
Okay.
I'm a realistic optimist.
What does that mean?
That means that it probably will get worse before it gets better. But that's okay, because my parents and the country that I come from, Belgium, was invaded. My grandparents were in a concentration camp. We rebuilt Europe. We now have the European Union. We may have Ukraine join the European Union. We didn't see all of that coming. It was hard for many. I think that's okay. We have gotten so complacent. We haven't even stood up to the test of time. So I would say truth to power, be a realistic optimist. But yeah, it's okay if it's hard. That's the only way you actually see joy, is if you see pain.
It forces progress.
Exactly.
I am an absolute optimist, and I think I'm an optimist realist, or other way around. 2022 is the greatest year to be born in the history of humanity. People live longer, people die of fewer diseases, we have more access to food despite food insecurity. We have fewer wars, we have fewer people who die of bloodshed. What makes the Ukraine war so traumatic for a lot of people, beyond the obvious humanity crisis, is that it's a shattering of an international norm which is relatively recent. Countries do not invade other countries. This is a fairly recent norm that we've gotten very used to. This is the deliberate result of human progress.
And human suffering.
And human suffering. We've gotten used to fewer wars, fewer conflict, fewer civil wars, fewer terrorist attacks, so that when we see it happening, it causes a global shock. So it should be a reminder of how far we've come and how fragile it can be. But I'm an optimist that it'll get better.
And our honorary chair, optimist or
Yeah, by choice.
by choice?
Yeah, I choose to be, because that's the only way you can move forward, right? So true.
Okay.
I was doing something about it also.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.